And there's new reporting on a phone call between the president and the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Sources telling CNN that the president at one point wasn't happy earlier today about a report he saw regarding the online retail giant. Amazon then clarifying their plans. Let's get the latest from Elena Treen, who's at the White House for us. And Elena, you got the scoop about this Trump-Bezos call. It all has to do with a certain section of that website potentially showing shoppers how much Trump tariffs might cost them, right?
That's exactly right. So essentially, I'll just give you the breakdown of how this played out as, it is according to the senior White House officials I spoke with on this. Essentially, there was a story published this morning by Punchbowl News that said Amazon was considering to show the cost of tariffs on Amazon's website next to its prices to show the breakdown of how much more the tariffs were making these products cost. That was something that then one senior White House official who I spoke with called President Trump about directly to inform him of it. Now, this is what one of those officials told me the response was. They said, quote, "Of course he was pissed. Why should a multi-billion-dollar company pass off costs to consumers?" Then we learned, and this is according to two senior White House officials I spoke with, that the president was so angered by this, he called up the founder of Amazon himself, Jeff Bezos, to complain about the potential plans that were being reported on. We also heard White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt say publicly that they believed that the move was a hostile political act. All to say, after all of that, the White House making very clear their position, both publicly and privately, Amazon then seemed to backtrack. They had one statement come out from an Amazon spokesperson that essentially said, quote, "It was never a consideration for the Man Amazon site, and nothing had been implemented on Amazon properties." They said it was only going to be for certain products on its website. But then when I reached out to Amazon, they sent me a different statement saying it was their latest version of it. And essentially it added and made clear that it was never approved and not going to happen. So I think it's just a pretty remarkable story, really, of how this all played out. And really, I think the bottom line here is it shows that this White House did not want the tariff prices and the cost of these tariffs being shown. They were also, really taking issue with the fact that some of the costs of the tariffs could be passed on from Amazon to consumers.
And Elena, on the auto tariffs and the president's event tonight, what should we expect?
Yeah, look, this is something that we heard confirmed this morning from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Essentially, the president is going to be signing a new executive order today. We're told he'll sign it on board Air Force One as he travels to Michigan for his rally to mark his first 100 days in office. And essentially, the order is going to ease some of the tariffs on automakers. Now, I was told in my conversations with White House officials that this came after the president had spoken on multiple occasions with different CEOs of the major automaker companies. And this is something as well we heard Scott Bessent said that they want to try and help these automakers. They want to encourage them and motivate them to bring manufacturing to the United States. And in order to do that, they might have to soften the impact of some of the tariffs that we're seeing the president roll out. Now, this executive order, some Commerce Department officials walked through some of the details with reporters. It's very wonky, but I want to give you kind of the 50,000-foot view, Boris. Essentially, the 25% tariff on imported cars still remains, and that's going to continue remain. There's also going to be a new tariff going into effect this week, and another 25% tariff on parts, auto parts coming into the United States. However, this new order will give the ability for some of these automakers to get reimbursed for some of the 25% tariffs, but then also they really are looking at trying to prevent domestic-made cars in the United States from being tariffed in the same rate that auto cars would be tariffed, as well as the foreign parts of different tariffs, even in domestically produced cars. All that to say, it's very complex, but it's clear what they're trying to do here. They're trying to ease the impact that some of these automakers are feeling, and really their bottom line goal is to encourage manufacturing in the United States. That's the bottom line with what they're trying to do here, and you are seeing the stock market respond kind of favorably to the news of this, Boris.
Elena Treen live for us at a noisy White House. Sounds like a plane overhead. Elena, thank you so much.
This Amazon White House spat over what Amazon is now saying was just this kind of idea that was being discussed to list tariff upcharges on some Amazon haul products. What do you think just about the idea of this, about letting consumers know what a tariff policy is costing them?
Well, it's a tough calculation for a giant retailer like Amazon, but if it's doable, it's a fantastic idea. The fact is that tariffs are taxes, and they are typically paid by American companies and consumers. Any bit of sunlight that we can shed on that tax would be a good thing, because typically tariffs are hidden. They're hidden in the supply chains. They're paid at the border. That's one reason why politicians like tariffs. They're a very seductive tool because consumers don't typically see them. So if we could shed some light on it, that'd be pretty great, but it's not an easy calc.
There was a pretty important development that just happened. It continues to develop, but we saw a big shift right before we came on air. And this has to do with Amazon and President Trump and Jeff Bezos. What happened?
Yeah, speaking of needing 7 hours to explain something. So Punchbowl News, our great friends and colleagues over at Punchbowl News broke the story this morning that one of the offshoot websites of Amazon was going to post the price differential based on tariffs on the website so consumers would see it. You've actually seen companies do this in the past with inflation prices, those things like that. Trump, according to our colleague Elena Treen, with great reporting, picked up the phone and called Bezos, who he's gotten increasingly close with over the course of the last several months, was very upset about what happened. Now Amazon is saying that is not under consideration. It will not be implemented. They backed off. And I think there's a bigger picture here that's important to note. Trump has a level of authority and influence over the business community that he never had before now. The problem in this specific case is Amazon is one of hundreds of thousands of companies.
Garrett, key White House officials were pressed about these tariffs and this new Amazon move just last hour. What did they say?
Yeah, on the tariffs more broadly, you heard some optimism that there could be trade deals struck in the not too distant future from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who talked about the use of what he called euphemistically the president's strategic uncertainty in his negotiating position over time here. On Amazon, in this report that Amazon might start listing the additional cost on specific items put in place by the tariffs, the president is clearly angry. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said she had spoken to him about it this morning. And the question, the idea that this shows factually that it is American consumers who pay the cost of tariffs, not the Chinese or any other foreign government, seemed to be the thing that set off the president's anger. Listen to how the White House Press Secretary addressed this issue.
I just got off the phone with the president about Amazon's announcement. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years? And I would also add that it's not a surprise because, as Reuters recently wrote, Amazon has partnered with a Chinese propaganda arm. So this is another reason why Americans should buy American.
So just to clarify, not an announcement from Amazon, just a report at this juncture, and something we should definitely watch closely given the White House's response to it and how much attention we've all been paying to the relationship between President Trump and Amazon's multi-billionaire owner, Jeff Bezos, now at least a bit rockier than it was this time yesterday.
Yeah, Christine, before we go bigger picture on Trump's first 100 days, talk about Amazon and the potential price difference they could be highlighting if they indeed show what the tariffs cost.
Well, if you have a 145% tariff on Chinese goods, any Chinese goods sold by Amazon then would have a higher cost. I mean, you think of it this way, you know, a $10,000 container of goods coming over would have a $14,500 tariff on it. I mean, that's more than the cost of the goods is the cost of the tariff. That will clearly be a big cost difference for these sellers that are selling on Amazon. What's interesting to me is you've already seen Temu and Shein raise their prices, and one of those low-cost retailers actually putting right in the cart the cost of the import charge. A lot of people had noticed that over the past couple of days, so sort of breaking out the import charge. So we may see more retailers start to do that, although you can see from the White House, they're taking that, if that were to happen at Amazon, as a political move.
It would be a sticker shock for consumers, though. Garrett, you also have reporting on tariff walkbacks, at least when it comes to the auto industry. It's going to help the auto industry. What do we know?
Well, that's the way the White House and the Commerce Department is framing this new decision today, which is to basically say that the president's 25% tariffs on automobiles and auto parts are the only tariffs that will apply to those businesses. They won't be stacked, if you will, on top of tariffs on steel and aluminum, which are obviously key components in cars, or added to tariffs that affect just Canada or just Mexico or just Germany, for example, places where we might import cars or parts. The idea is to make it a little bit simpler, a little bit easier for these auto companies to invest in the United States, so says the White House. But the price of cars is still going to go up, and many of the companies, the big three, the domestic auto manufacturers and parts manufacturers, have responded tepidly, let's say, to this announcement. It will help them, but it's not the same as getting out from under these more burdensome tariffs on the industry more broadly.
And Christine, the president has faced backlash on the economy, largely driven by the tariffs, which continue to be a moving target.
Right.
Walk us through the president's economic actions and the impact in these first 100 days of his administration.
Well, it's really the rollout and the strategy, and what people who are going to be at the other end of his tariffs see as a haphazard kind of implementation of his tariffs. I mean, here's the recipe of what we have: are 145% on imports from China. That is essentially grinding trade between the world's two biggest economies to a halt. And that's where we'll be watching to see the goods that are still coming in. At what point will you begin to see those import surcharges on your bills? But the steel and aluminum, the USMCA, there already was a trade deal with Canada and Mexico that the president ripped up himself. So that begs the question, what kind of reliable trading partner is the U.S.? So this is what's all on the table right now. And then you look at what the stock market makes of that. As you pointed out in your intro, this is the worst performance for a first 100 days of a president since Richard Nixon, an almost 8% decline in the S&P 500, and roiled markets from the dollar and to the bond market as well. So just an awful lot of uncertainty.
I know Donald is furious right now because all of his business buddies are turning on him. This is the man who was like in Trump Tower. I'm going to be going all the way back to 2015, 2016. And even after he lost his first re-election attempt, he was like, I'm going to be the guy for business. The business leaders love me. All the big corporations are going to want to be with me because fundamentally I'm going to be the one that brings jobs to America, brings manufacturing back, makes American domestic production so much stronger. And all the businesses are going to make tons of money. Workers are going to make tons of money. And what we did see is for a little bit, they were coming back to Donald. We saw that. We saw Bezos, one example, give money to Trump's inauguration. We saw him effectively make a donation to Trump in terms of how he shifted the Washington Post coverage, saying we're not going to cover any left-wing ideas anymore, especially on economics, and we are going to not endorse anybody. They didn't endorse Trump, but by not endorsing the Democrats as a traditionally, maybe slightly left of center paper, that was effectively an endorsement for Trump. It's like if Fox didn't endorse the Republican, but not the Democrat, you'd be like, okay, well, that's fine. But if Fox was neutral, that would be a big win for the Democrats, for example. And so it was looking good for him, but now these companies are turning on him because they are losing big. It's because all of them, depending on what they do, if you're a manufacturer, you're losing because you're not able to ship your goods out and the raw materials you need are more expensive. American manufacturers are having a hard time selling stuff. And companies like Bezos' company that relies on importing, they import a lot of stuff and then sell it to you, right? They're basically a giant middleman, but they're very successful at it. But now your prices are going up because their prices are going up. If they import something from China and then sell it to you, they're going to charge you more. And by putting the tariffs on and showing people, it exposes Trump. In Trump Tower, his business world buddies are turning on him.